Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so happy to see all of you. And let's begin with the Enneagram Tritype Test version 8 and how to work with it. So my first job is to introduce Val. Is there anything you'd like to say about yourself, Val? Like what you do?
I'm Val,
How
for
long you've
short.
known the Enneagram?
I've been following the Enneagram for coming up to 2.5 years, if not 3 years, probably actually. Just prior to COVID, I started looking into typology, and but it was a year. Well, actually, I did a test, Catherine's test, sort of soon afterwards. But then after that, I left it for a year, and then came back again and really got into Enneagram, and obviously, I'm here. So yeah.
There you go. And he's being my guinea pig. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So will you go ahead and pull up your test? And in Val's case, as I mentioned, he took version 7. And for those of you who don't realize the difference, I'll show you when we get there. So the most important thing is that we see the blue banner. When you get your email with your results, you see the blue banner. What the blue banner tells you is how you saw yourself, how you tested, not necessarily your accurate type or tritype, but it does reveal critical things. And we do have a self-image that we're identified with that may not match the deeper self-image and the defense structure that we actually use. So in this case, Val chose type 8 as his Enneagram type. And for his tritype, he chose 862. Now that's a pretty good sign that his Enneagram type and his lead type and the tritype were both 8. But sometimes it can be just the opposite. You might have chosen one type as your type and then put your stacking order of your head, your heart, and your gut, the way you think, feel, and act, in a different order. And every single thing you do is meaningful. There are no wrong answers. It's meant to be deliberately vague. There are key patterns throughout that are saying things that really help me, in this case, narrow down where your attention goes, why, when, and how. And then when I do a session with you, obviously there's a 9th perspective. So this is 8 tests in 1. So that's why it takes a long time to do. But then if you do a session with me, I evaluate your vocabulary, the words you chose, and I go through the test, but I also check against your definition of your words as opposed to what my definition would be. Because we could be using the same vocabulary, but meaning something very different by it. So the banner will also alert you if you have a very important situation where it's revealing that your types don't match. So it just indicates you need to look deeper. And it also reveals if someone has 6 and 9, no matter what they put in the blue banner, and it will be posted at the bottom, a little asterisk. Now, in this case, he didn't get that. So that means he didn't have a particular pattern that would indicate that. Can you go to the first page, Val? The Enneagram type? Okay, now, oh no, this does say version 8. I guess I have a version 8 point something. We'll see, because the date's missing. Okay, so it says version 8. So if you want to know what yours is, you just look here. I've moved the placement around, explaining how this test is different. And I never intended to make the test tell you what you are or aren't, because you make all of your choices. But I did want the test programmed with what I've seen in hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands. Well, I mean, just this last test alone that came out in 2020 is over 200,000. Just to give you an idea, getting the adjectives, the words, the pictures, the phrases, the ordering, there are so many subtleties that it's much, much more personalized than you can possibly imagine because of what was built into it. I was very lucky to find someone that was self-taught programmer that could do anything that I wanted. He's really good. He's not available now. He's helping me with a new person, but it's 7 or 8 people felt like they couldn't touch this test because they didn't even know what he was doing or how he did it. So you will understand as I go through this why it may be a little confusing to you. But all I want on this home page is for you to still be able to see your banner all the way through, how you saw yourself, the card you chose. Now, the card you chose is important. And when we get to Tritype, it'll be even more important. But in the very beginning, I gave you 3 Enneagram cards for each Enneagram type. You had to rank those. So the computer is picking up your ranking from the very beginning. So sometimes when people say, oh, well, there isn't that much diversity. Actually, there's more diversity than any other test on the market in any way, because you ranked them. And if you just do the math, some people could take the first set of 3 cards and rank them one way, and 2 other people could rank them another way. And then that happens 27 times, 9 times with 3 variables, 27. There's all kinds of combinations. And that's before I've ever even served you a question. So each person is working with their own card choices, not mine. I may have built 3 for each type, that would be mine, but you chose your first choice card, your second choice card, and your third choice card, which is really critical about what you end up with at the end. Some people want to beat the test and they do everything possible to not choose the type they don't want to be. And I understand that that's the defense strategy of one of the types to avoid being detected. But having said that, there are so many patterns programmed into this test that it'll still tell you if you're that type that you don't want to be, because it notices the pattern. And each Enneagram type uses a particular pattern. Each Tritype is more specific. So in the beginning, and now I'm always open to feedback. Someone said to me, oh, you have a glitch. You know, I didn't choose the 6 card. I deliberately didn't choose the 6 card. But the test results said that I'm most likely a 6. And I said, actually, that's not a glitch. That's one of those situations, because even though type 6 has the greatest difficulty confirming their type, followed by 9, type 9, and if 9 has 6 as their head type, they're pretty darn close to the dilemma the 6 faces. But having said that, it tracks that, and it tracks how consistent you were, like whatever you chose in first, second, and third position, and then it shows up later and you reverse the order, you made a change. And Katherine would say, why? What changed for you? And a lot of people say, oh, no, I'm sure I didn't change. Okay, there's something that you can do. Val, can you scroll down to show answers? I just want to let people know up front. If you click on, here's everything you answered, your adjectives are first and then keep scrolling. So here were Val's cards. Here, those are his adjectives at the very beginning of the test, the really open-ended, put your own words in there version of the test. Then I gave him the 3 cards, and that's how he ranked them. So he went with the overall 3 card, and socials will usually choose the second one, or if they know success is really important to them. And a lot of times the intimate sexual type will choose this one, but it's not an absolute. It's more why. And that's something that we can discuss in a session. I won't have time to go into that in any depth today. Then these are his 7 cards. This is the order he put them in. Keep going. So this is how he ranked his cards. Then I gave him rounds where he had to choose. They were served to him, and then he had to rank again. Every time he had to rank, every time you or your friend or family member or client will rank. And that ranking is revealing a lot, because it's not just a yes or a no. It's a ranking over and over and over again. Now, some people say, oh, that test took so long, and it seemed like I was looking at the same cards over and over again. Well, usually that'll be the case with 6 and 9, because they make different choices. And so they have more playoff rounds. But if you scroll further, Val, all the way down till we get to the sentences. Then the other thing I did is I had your first choice cards against your second choice card. And I had your statement. So you can go look at what you did when after the fact. I found that with my very first online test, that people would need to take the test over and over again to try and figure out why it turned out the way it did. And I thought, hey, I'll just pay for it to be put in there. I want it. And people that are enthusiasts, or they want to be able to look at associates or clients or friends, family, they want to know too. So let's just see. Then every choice you made, and here, this is truly version 8, because here are the idealized images and the core fears. I guess it won't let me do that. So every choice. And so if you say, oh, no, I didn't choose that, or I meant this, that can happen, but it's going to be there. Same with your instincts choices. Now, I'm going to recognize a particular pattern that I know ones use when they're answering the questions. There will be a particular phrase that they'll identify with, or an 8 or a 2 or 7 or a 5 or 4 or 9 or 6 or 5 or 3. There are patterns all the way through that are important. But what I want you to see first is beginning again with the banner, and then the main page, which is what you receive. And I found people don't read this paragraph in the way where it explains it's a different test and it's working from a different perspective. They just see the card, they see the type in the card, and they think, yep, I'm this type, or no, I'm not that type. But actually you have to scroll and see if there are any special notices. Now, Val got 3. The first is, this confirms you have type 6 and or type 9 in your tritype. It may be difficult to make important decisions. Okay, back to the banner. Well, he's got 6. So it's validating that 6 is his head type. But wait a minute. It's also saying 9 is a possibility. So when you see that pattern, you want to be sure just to check out the type 9. Let's see what else he got. Because that statement is worthy of checking out both 6 and 9. The next one he got is, if you're receiving this notice, it is because you have shown a common 6 pattern of being consistently inconsistent. Okay, that means when you're presented with the same card choices, you ranked them differently. And that is very much a part of the defense strategy of 6, because the 6 is meant to track inconsistencies. The best trackers, the people that are most able to notice when people are not as they appear, or something feels off or not quite right, the people who see it first are 6s. And at the same time, they do not want to be exposed. So they also try to protect their own experience so that they will not be targeted or taken advantage of. Now, the third one he got is, you're receiving this special notice because you have key patterns that indicate the type 6. Okay, it's saying, yeah, the 6 is a done deal. And yet, how would I say this? I'm always open to the exception to the rule, but it's very rare to get these messages and not have 6 or 9 in your tritype. It just doesn't happen. And people say, well, what if I was having a bad day? Well, those two types, 6 and 9, do vary their answers depending on what they feel that day. The other types don't. So it means you still need to just look at 6 and 9. And what's so important about 3, 6, and 9 is they're the core types of the Enneagram. Everything else is just a variation on those 3. As a result, they're almost invisible. Like, as a 3 culture, so many people don't think they're a 3. Yet, if we're a 3 culture, we all have that imprinting. Or there are people in business that are told they need to be successful, and they might not be a 3, but they'll use all the 3 words, but it doesn't land for them. And when they come to the choice points, they won't choose it. So it's very interesting as to what we will write about ourselves on a questionnaire when we don't know how it's going to be used, as opposed to choosing A or B, or ranking things over a 5-point system. Like, one piece of research that I did was ranking that. And if they were words that were really indicative of a type, they got a 5. And if they were really words that the type would never use, it was given the 1. And then there was it adds up, and then it's pretty indicative of type 2 as well, in addition, not TWO, but also. All right, so then there's a description of the type you chose, but if it said, wait a minute, you need to consider that you have 6 or 9, it is in there as well. Now, someone asked me recently why I didn't include the 3 types that they used in their tritype. And it's a very good question, because obviously you might want to read this. Now, they're all on my website and you can get to them easily, but I was just doing it with people that were potentially mistyped. Now, the next thing I want to do is see which 3 cards the person chose. Remember, I said you had 3 cards of each type, and you narrowed it down to 1 overall, or 3, 1 from each center: your head, your heart, and gut, your feeling, and your acting. And in this case, for Val, the 3 together created the rescuer archetype, the helpful person, the hero, the person that really wants to do what's right by people, and not as in right or wrong by rules and regulations, but what feels just right as a human being. And that is 8 lead, but I'm paying attention to which 8 card he chose of the 3. And I know that this 8 card is also liked by the type 6 and the type 9. So that 9 is still, for me, potentially there, but I'm open to it. Then his second card was the 6. Now, that's important because he also got the messages that he should consider 6 as his head type, and he did. But this particular 6 card is the intimate sexual type, meaning wanting a close bond, wanting a relationship where you're self-revealing and you're in sync with each other. So in the case of the 6, it's very interesting because it makes the 6 more 8-ish, stronger, more assertive, more self-confident. They may have kind of things they're concerned about, but they're so practiced and rehearsed, and they've developed mind over matter from a young age, or they're smart and they already know what they would do, that they're just confident in the moment that they're concerned about. Now, that moment is not an original moment, because 6s, or if you have 6 as one of your 3 types, you've thought about what can go wrong your entire life. And you've thought to yourself, well, if that happens, I'll do this. Oh, new information. The bully on the bus is picking on kids that wear red. Okay, I won't wear red. And there can be all kinds of ways that you adapt or you use your intelligence to navigate uncomfortable situations. Or you may have developed your physical prowess or your interpersonal skills, and you win people over, or they're afraid of you. But that is still something that is an advantage, but it doesn't mean there isn't a part of you that says, well, I don't want to go against the rules. I don't want to be blamed for anything. I don't want someone to be mad at me. So the structures are really important overall. Then the third card that he chose for his heart. So the assumption here is that he acts first, then thinks, and then feels. Someone else might feel, think, act. These are other standard typologies that I just found work very well when I came up with this theory, when I was interviewing people and people were choosing a type from each center, which made sense to me. I'd certainly seen that for 9 years before I did the research. But when I did the research, it became very clear that people were choosing a type from each center. Now, they might have an extra type in there, so 4, and we just had to see why. And were they types right next to each other, so a wing type? Or were they opposite ends of a center? And that's a whole study unto itself as well. So, for example, if you got down to 5 and 7 in your head center, you might think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, it doesn't, because they're the opposite expression of the head center. One is introverted and totally managing their own perspective, and the other is looking to see what others are doing and asking or creating rapport to be more at ease. They're opposites. So in a way, we have to look at whether or not they're pointing at the type in the center. And you wouldn't know this. I know this just because I've seen people do it so many times. And remember I said the 3, 6, and 9 can be invisible. We don't know we're using them. But something like that reveals kind of like a a black hole, so to speak. It's like we can't necessarily see it, but we can see other things that exist. So it means there would have to be something pulling the energy in a particular way. And in the case of the Enneagram type, it is a matter of doing that real fast. Now with the instincts, I just like to look quickly to see if someone, what card they chose. In this case, he chose a sexual intimate card, meaning twinship, partner, belonging, not in general, but to one person supreme, rather than needing to be kind of safe and secure with everybody, or safe and secure doing your own thing on your own completely without being connected to others, and managing your own resources and what you have in life, versus the sexual intimate, which says you and me against the world. I want to find the one. And if I find the one, we'll handle things together. And so there's a need for twinship, being in sync, two sides of a coin. And they're just different strategies. Now, there are more people that are going to be focused on their resources, because that's the self-preservation. And it's the kind of the defense of the defenses. If there was an earthquake right now, I live in California, so I probably wouldn't react as much as I should. But I think, oh, don't want my computer hurt. But if there was another person, I'd just ignore the computer and make sure the other person was okay. Now, the self-pres person immediately thinks, well, they already know the exits. They already know what they should or shouldn't do, generally speaking, about their resources, what they do and don't have, or where the fire extinguisher is, or what have you. And it was actually a self-pres 6 in a big building that said, Katherine, do you know where the alarms are? Because sometimes you're here ahead of us. And if there was an emergency, do you know where the stairs are? Do you know where all the stuff is? And I said, nah, I just will follow the other people. And I said, when did you know? This is the first day I walked the whole building to know where everything was. And in my own way, I was thinking, well, when I come in to teach, I'm generally linked up with someone who's in charge of making sure everything goes well. But he made a very good point, because I like to, at lunch, kind of come and have a few minutes to myself before we started. So he was worried about those few minutes if I knew what to do. And it was very good, because I was never good at that. Never crossed my mind. Now, I'm just noticing the order too. In this case, he chose the sexual, then the self-pres, then the social. But I also want to look at, when I asked him the questions, what order did he have? So pictures can influence us. So I like to always include kind of individual words with pictures and sentences. It's different order: intimate, social, self-pres. But when he looked at the words with the pictures, he reversed it. So that means that they're probably close, but it's worth going a little deeper to see that. If we were doing the longer session, I would definitely go into that. Okay, now, Enneagram spreads, this tab is for you to quickly get to all your top choices. Now, all coaches and therapists and an Enneagram enthusiasts love this page once they know how to use it, because it immediately shows you important things. So the analogous Enneagram spreads just mean those first known patterns that emerged in like 1985 with the Hornavians and the harmonics. They were, Naranjo and Echazo called them antipodes, and then there was a center that matched it. Independent of that, Don and Riso and Russ Hudson found there were these similarities. And then if you think of the original triads, that would be the 3-6-9, and then the 1-4-7 and the 2-5-8. Those were the first tritypes. People just didn't realize it. Now, I probably need to add in the image that shows all that and the unfolding of it. But I just thought, okay, I'll work with what people know and see what emerges. But what happens instead is that I get the self-image. So in this analogous Enneagram spread, it's definitely your self-image, however you answer this. So all of a sudden he has no head type cards, 1 heart, and 5 gut. So it says a number of things. One is that it already let him know that he is doing different things with the 6 card. And choosing no head type cards is a way saying, well, I don't see that part of myself, but I do see the gutsy part of myself. So he's got 2 8 cards at the top. He's got the 1 card in the left column, and he's got the 9 card in the right column, and then another 1 card. So his whole right side is 8, 9, and 1. Now, this is a pattern you wouldn't know, but if someone has a column that's all the full head center, the full heart center, the full gut center, they usually lead with that center. But if they have all 3 like this, it's pointing not to 8, even though he chose 2 8 cards. It's pointing to 9, because 9 is the type that holds 8 and 1. 9 is the center of the center. So they're just maintaining balance. So the 6 is maintaining balance between 5 and 7, which is why they'll choose 5 if they're introverted, and they'll choose 7 if they're extroverted. The 3 is holding 2 and 4. The extroverted person will choose 2. They can still be 3, but they'll choose 2. And the introverted person will choose 4. These are just really important things to understand about human nature. This is a typology not based on what we do, but what motivates us and the defense strategies we use. Our idealized images, like how we see ourselves, our core fears, what we want to avoid, and then what we do to make sure that we don't have to face those core fears and lose our sense of self. So I already know that there's a high probability that he's a gut type. And then he has, as his heart type, he has a 4. Now the left column are all his first choice cards. The right column are all the second choice cards. And then if you consider the third choice cards and you say, oh, where are those? They're in show answers. I use it in a more advanced way, sometimes doing the session, especially if we can do the 2 hours, I'm going to want to look at why you didn't choose something or why you did in one place and not another. And I'll go through show answers. But I've been doing testing since I was a senior in high school, and I learned that you can't have a third factor of any depth. That's why there's, the analogous and the tritype. Really, there's 4 variations, which is pushing it. But if I had 2 more, people would just start making stuff up and they just want to get the test over with. And then you lose the whole idea of the test. But I still wanted to know how you ranked it in the very beginning, because that is important. And what we don't do is just as important as what we do. What we choose is important, but what we don't choose is just as important, but in a different way, depending on our type, depending on our tritype, our instinctual stacking, the stacking of our tritype, our life experiences, our Myers-Briggs type. all kind of move into one another in a way. In this case, he has this very specific pattern and almost the same exact pattern here. But when he could have chosen the 9 on the left column, he chose 4. Now, so when I see that, I always ask the person, were they going through a hard time or did they have a painful childhood? And if they say yes, just know that that can influence what card they might choose. So Val, when you were taking this test, just out of curiosity, what did you like about all the gut type cards, choosing 5 of them, putting them at the top?
Because they're quite definite in terms of action. So, and also because I work in a corporate office. This is very much, they're looking for people who are definite and have answers. So it is very much kind of having all that information to hand and being organized.
You know, he just said something so remarkably important, and that is that anyone that leads with 3, 6, or 9 adapts and alters to the situation in front of them. And they take on the identity and the behaviors that they perceive they need to have to do well in a particular circumstance. So they might say to me, like when I did my first, just the any style part, the questionnaire part, I would have people call me, that was in the 90s. We didn't, the internet was just coming online and most people weren't on it. There was no Facebook or anything. So people would call, Katherine, which image do you want of me? And I go, well, I just want your image. They go, yeah, but I'm this way at this country club, at this child's school, I'm that way. And I'm figuring out what they want. And then I'm adjusting. I said, okay, give me all your images because I wanted to know. I said, but stack them. And sure enough, the 3, 6, or 9 that asked me that question were trying to figure out how to give me the best answer, but they knew they altered, adapted. Now we use particular words for a particular type. Like we say, oh, the 3 is the most adaptable. And they are from the standpoint that they know they're adaptable because they want to win situation. They want to be a winner. They're going to adapt. But the 3 is looking at you, look at them, and then they're ever so slightly changing what they say, or if they're trying to track you. And if I'm using the in-depth inquiry process, the superego can't project where I'm going because I'm tracking the emotions. I'm not tracking anything that seems logical because I'm following the person. But in this case, Val just said something really key, and that is that he needed to be a particular way for a job. That's how he saw himself. That's how he took this test. And then I just repeat the notes in case you need to know them. I gave you all your first choice heart cards, and you had to choose one. Okay, in his case, he chose the 2. Now, up above, remember, he had a 4. And there's a reason for that, because he couldn't choose a 2 because the 2 was the same place as the 1, and he chose the 1 above. So there are kind of 4 situations in here, but that's why they're so different, the 2 different use of the cards. But in this case, I said, okay, here's 2, 3, and 4. Of your first choices, what do you choose? He chose 2. But when he later stacked them, he put it down at the bottom. Then I gave the head cards, which of the 5, 6, and 7, what do you relate to? 6. And then 8, 9, and 1 of your first choice cards, what do you relate to? 8. Then he had to take these 3 cards and then shift them the way it was true for him. So that adds another dimension of individuality, because it isn't just the first card you choose. What did you make second? What did you make third? And did you have a different order up here? Well, he chose the 1 over the 6 before, but he could, because he was given 1, 2, 6 when he chose the 1. Hornavians is what that first column are Hornavians, for those of you who know. But then on the right side, he did choose 8 again, but even though he had 8 at the top of the other analogous Enneagram spread, this time, nope, he moved 6 to the top. And it's probably because of the problem solver, because he did share with me that 6 is his problem solver and figures out what can go wrong. But 6 is the most invisible type. 9 is invisible to not be a problem. 6 is invisible from the standpoint that you're going to think you're 7 or 5, and you might be moving back and forth between them. Now, Val, do you see yourself as an introvert or an extrovert? You have INTJ. How strong is the introversion?
I will probably opt for introversion, but at times, if I'm with people I know, then I'm more extrovert.
Okay, so that can be a factor. And just notice if you identified, if you're MBTI, if you know your Myers-Briggs type, if it matches, like I have 8, which is kind of a no-nonsense person, but we're pretty extroverted from the standpoint of how we move in the world. And then my Myers-Briggs type is ENTP, so they go together. It matches. However, a lot of the descriptions now of ENTP are talking about the antisocial, social 6. And yeah, there's some 7 still left in there, but the rest of the types that could be ENTP missing. And what can happen with any typology is it can be so overly described that it no longer hits the mark anymore. And I would never see myself in a lot of the descriptions of ENTP now with the way they're described. But when I taught Myers-Briggs, yeah, I fit perfectly. Having said that, there are many different approaches, just as there are with the Enneagram. So you need to make sure that you compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. And that's why a lot of times with this test, I tell people that if we come out seeing you differently, meaning myself and the person that I'm typing, it could be the definition. So there were aspects of the Enneagram types that were left out accidentally, or they were unknown in the dissemination of the Enneagram. Now, the only reason I know what was left out and who left it out and who added what is because, being excessive by nature as Nate, I studied with everybody. I certified with the first teachers. Those were the first programs you could go to. And then I also attended an intensive with the Chazo and with Naranjo. So I know what they taught and what they didn't teach. And then I also certainly met other people that had worked with them that had even more to say. So all I would offer is, if some of these don't quite make sense to you when you're looking at your own results, it could be a matter of how the type is defined. And if we look at each Enneagram type, there are roughly 9 archetypes, 3 very specific archetypes. But in some cases, many of the archetypes were just dropped, or they were put into the wrong type. Like a whole chunk of type 2 was put into 9 and into 7. So a lot of times 9s will read some descriptions of type 2 and say I'm a 2 or I'm a 7. But in another author's work, it's the reverse. So 2 is one of the types that you need to learn all the archetypes in order to accurately understand what it means to be a 2, and that some people are 2s and don't realize it. They think they're 7s or 9s. Now, the other thing that can happen is 8s. Like, I was fortunate in that I got my first information, because there weren't books. There was one book, I take that back, but it was not available. I didn't know where to find it. I went to bookstores all the time. Actually found the Enneagram by attending a workshop on symbols. And the person sitting next to me raised her hand when the instructor said, "Are any of you familiar with the modern day application of the Enneagram symbol?" And the person next to me raised her hand. And he said, "Can you just give me 5 minutes on that?" And she did. And I go, "Hey, we got to talk. I work with, people all over the country, and I'm trying to manage disparities. And I want to know about this system. Why don't I know about it?" And she said, "Well, you almost have to have known someone to know about it." And she happened to get her PhD and was able to take a course at ITP, which is it's no longer in existence, but it was a transformational perspective in terms of psychology. And so the person who taught this had a full notebook ready, obviously, for attendees. And then the woman that was in that symbols class, after we had talked every break, every lunch, and then met thereafter, gave me that book. So I had all the key things. Now, was it really extensive? No, but I didn't have to unlearn anything, because the types were directly one step removed from how they were intended. And it was Naranjo's girlfriend that taught that class. So she'd been in his course, so there was literally only one step removed. Whereas later, people were trying to not violate each other's copyrights and named the types differently and described them a little differently, all with really good intentions. But then it changed the definitions of the types. So I encourage you to not go with a description and instead find your idealized image, because I know that Val's idealized image has, in one way or another, to do with being strong and weighing pros and cons, questioning things, and being kind to people. So the ranking becomes important. Now, if on your test, your little purple halo around the card is on the right side, or it's not this top left corner, it also says you're a 6 or a 9, because it means your first choice card is no longer your first choice card. You reversed it. And the reason that 6s and 9s do that is the 6 is saying, well, but I don't do that, so I'm going to choose this card this time. I don't do that. Oh, okay, then I'm going to change that. But that's why there's so many playoffs, because the defense strategy says, yeah, I don't want to be a target, and this can be true too, and I'm not that, this one part of it. Whereas the 9, on the other hand, is not the opposing force. So the 3 is the initiating force. So 2, 3, and 4 are all generating rapport, doing something to establish rapport. And then 5, 6, and 7 are all saying, well, wait a minute, and pointing out the other perspective of whatever anything is. So the 6 is the opposing force. So of course they're going to say, oh yeah, I'm not a 6 because I don't do this, and I don't do that, or I don't do this, or I'm not a 3 in the heart center because I don't do this or this. but they're saying what they don't do, which is natural because they're opposing and seeking balance, pros and cons, weighing and measuring. Whereas the 9 is saying, yeah, that's me too. I also do that. And they just keep adding what they do, as opposed to saying, well, I don't do this, I don't do that. They say, I can do this, I can do that. So, and why? 9 is the point of integrating. So taking disparity and then putting it together and creating a new whole. So there's a reason for every single thing that we do. We just don't know it when we're first starting out. So anyhow, when it narrowed down, he stayed with these 3 types, which is why his banner up here says 862. So he had a chance to modify it from this. He could have moved anything around. And I also added a playoff comparing the top card winner with the second winner. So here's the self-reliant 8, and then up in the analogous spread, self-reliant 8. So in his case, nothing shows up because it's the same. But later on in version 8, I added it so that people can see, oh, I had 2 of the same card. But if you had 2 8 cards, but they were different, I want to know which you chose and why. Okay, so that's like an important pattern. And I do say, if your analogous and tri-type cards are the same, you will only see 1 card above them. And that was the case here. But then how do you respond to a written statement? It's fascinating to me that people don't do as well with the written statements in some ways and do far better in others. But now, all of a sudden, when he was given the 2, 3, and 4, he put the 3 at the top. There's no 3 card anywhere. This is the first time the 3 shows up. So he's had 8 as a top card, and he's had 6 as a top card. And now he has 3 as a top card. Then he had 6 and 8. So no 4 card. He went with the 3. Then, which is very normal again, because 3 is one of the invisible types that you might not see it until you compare. But then I added in the idealized images and the core fears, because the only way to type properly is to see those 3 in action. Now, the passions, the fixations, and the holy virtues and the holy ideas and the holy convictions that are really important to understand and work with, all important. But for typing purposes, you need to see the defense strategies, which will include some sort of image about themselves. Like for a 2, the image is that you know what someone needs and you're good at delivering it. Now, I just had blood work taken yesterday, I guess, and I had a really good 2 phlebotomist, and he knew it, and he said, I'm going to do this the way I think you should do it. He told me right up front, because I think I know. After 25 years, I think I know how, and I'm just smiling because that is the language of what a 2 does, because they're focused on what people need. So whatever their career is, they're very proficient at it. Now, with the core fears, though, he didn't choose 3. He chose type 9. He had 8 as a winning choice, and then he had 6. I was right. So 8, 6, and then I just mentioned 3 in the statements. He chose 3 first. And then in the core fears, he chose 9. That's 4 different top choices. So based on what I said at the very beginning, what does that usually indicate? That someone leads with 6 or 9 and probably has both. because you're meant to do this. Now, for his head type here, he then chose 7. Where did 7 come from? He didn't mention it before, but 9 and 7 are both positive. To succeed in the world, they need to be positive. And then he chose 3 again. So he has 3 in the top 3 in the written word in a sentence that is meaningful to him. Now, then I go to the part that really I have much more experience than anything in these adjectives. When I was an executive for a cosmetic company, I had to hire, train, develop, manage, fire, you name it, conflict management, or go where there was a problem account, any place in the country, and get them to be happy and create an event for them. So believe me, I took every course I could on working with people and typologies and all of it. Now, these seem like unimportant words, provided you followed the instructions and you just wrote what came to you. And then if you want to write something else, that's fine. But most people, when they had to do this with me, like in an interview, they didn't know what I was going to ask. And I just say, give me 5 words that would describe you to a total stranger that says the most about your character. And people just would go blank, but then they'd take a minute, and whatever those 5 words they came up with are primal. Because I then asked them, how is that important? Can you give me an example? So if it wasn't really true, then they falter. And this was in the 70s and 80s, and people were taking courses on how to interview and how to dress for success and what you should look like and say. And boy, people had gotten really good at interviewing. But with this system, it doesn't matter how good you are, your super ego cannot work as fast as I can tracking your micro expressions as you answer these questions. And what does that mean? That means that we can have little tiny movements, or we can have big movements. Like 6s will think, what? Wait a minute. One brow goes up, one goes down. Or you're kidding. And as they're thinking, they may even move their mouth from side to side, because it's part of the head center to do that. But the 5 masks it with being hidden, and the 7 masks it with being upbeat and positive. But the thing is, we all have some expressions that we can't hide. Like if we're sad about something, we'll swallow, even if we don't think we're sad. It could have been something that happened years ago, but it's still physiologically represented in a tiny or large expression. But when I say micro expression, as you define your words, and in this case, he had dependable, the type that uses that the most, 6. So we know that 6, it is his head type. He's had all these different conformations. Now the adjectives are saying that. Did you use a thesaurus, Val, or ask people before you filled this out?
Dependable was not a word I would use myself. It's a word that my mother used, mentioned about me. So it stuck.
Excellent. So that was a value, a family value, which we can definitely add. Now, I didn't put El Jefe or the Red Queen on mine, like my mother called me. But in a way, she was addressing something important as to how she saw me. She also saw me a little professor that I was always analyzing everything. And she said she felt like a bug on a board, because I would say, okay, Mom, you said this, but I think you meant this. So why did you say that? What was going on? I was just curious. You can see I was already interested in typology as a little kid. So we're just kind of the way we are. And then that shows up one way or another in our Enneagram type, our Tritype, our instinctual stacking, or our MBTI. It's there. We don't just suddenly become who we are. He also had helpful. Now, anyone with 9, 2, or 6 could potentially write the word helpful. There are other words like helpful that other types will use. Like, I'm pretty helpful, but I'd never use that word. I think I'm totally dependable, but I would never use that word. So what's important about this questionnaire is not what a type should or shouldn't say. It's how the type saw themselves, as opposed to the way they were described by others. Then the third one he has is thoughtful. Now, then what I have to find out with all of these is his definition. But thoughtful becomes very important because, like in Denmark, for example, thoughtful means you're thinking too much, you're overanalyzing. Whereas in the United States, thoughtful is considerate. But maybe in a family system, it was considered a good thing or a problematic thing. We need to know. So what's your definition of thoughtful, Val? And where did you grow up?
I grew up in the UK. I'm living in Australia now, but I grew up in a family where being considerate was important. So hence that would be my definition of thoughtful.
So it wasn't that you were thinking things and could.
No, nothing to do with overthinking. Being to me, well, in the family, thinking was something that you do in education. It's something which is acceptable. It wasn't seen as being anything negative.
Excellent. Now,
But if I can just add, interestingly, with respect to dependable, given that's a word that my mum used, which I guess is also a 9 thing, is that I think what other people say about me and put that in rather than necessarily thinking about myself and actually wanting. It's actually the 5th one is the one was the most important, but I kind of put that last.
Oh yeah, here's the thing. The stacking of these 5 adjectives is a whole study unto itself, and how we came up with our 5 is incredibly important. And the 9 and the 6 will choose words they've been told about themselves, where if I ask the question, like, what have you heard you're like from others that you feel is true, that would be a different answer than I am. And I'm vague. I made it vague, so vague that people hate it. But now, because of the internet, they can go on, look on a source. Well, what am I? Okay. And then they go back and then they put it in. But I say, true of you most of your life, most of the time. And I said, that particular adjective wasn't even really used when you were a child. What would you have used then? Oh, well, it depends on the situation. Okay, what situation does it depend on? So dependable in your case means considerate. Thoughtful and dependable means you carry through, you deliver what you promise. What does it mean to you?
I follow through. I hold my word. In fact, those first 4 kind of would look at as being, that would be my baseline without even sort of mentioning it. It's just, that's what I would do. It's just, this is what people say about me, and that's what I put into it, into the questionnaire. So adjective 5 is one which I would actually use myself as that I'm fair.
And what about reactionary? What does that mean to you?
Well, I know what reactionary for me is. It comes down to if somebody isn't considerate, or they go against what was agreed on, or for that matter, what wasn't agreed
So
on.
if they're not dependable, they're not.
And I can react quite quickly, because suddenly it's like, hold it, you're not holding your side of the bargain.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that could be 8, but it's usually people that have 6 in the tritype. because reactivity, it's a particular word choice. That's why it's important as to where it came from. Now, I was reactive, but I just never saw myself as reactive. I thought I was just handling things as they came up. But I knew that I had quick and firm opinions, but I knew I could change them. So I'd rather say I'm opinionated than a reactionary. So this is why it's important when you're looking at this, don't think of it in terms of how the type should be answering. It's so meaningful to find out why people choose the word that they do. And then when there's time, I get around the superego and find out, okay, I'll try and do it very quickly, Val. What if you weren't dependable? What would you have to contend with? What's the crazy idea of what would happen if you weren't a dependable person?
Being given grief or being blamed for something.
And if you were given grief and blamed for something?
Not being accepted, being excluded as a result of not following through.
And if you weren't accepted and you were excluded?
I'll try to make an effort to get back, not knowing how, but I would try to do so.
And that's a healthy superego, because he immediately went to what he would do to resolve the problem. But I'm not going to let him off the hook, because the point is to show why it's your number one word. So, okay, yeah, there's nothing you can do to redeem yourself. You are undependable. What would you have to contend with? You wouldn't be accepted. You might be blamed for things. What else?
It would be not loved.
And if you weren't loved?
That would be quite hard.
And what you want to do, if you're working with people, is just keep going. These go further than you can possibly imagine. So he quickly threw away being blamed, but really he's avoiding being blamed because he doesn't want to be in a position where he's not accepted, which is the issue all human beings have, but that nines will get to pretty darn fast. And then when we went deeper with that, where I didn't give him his healthy ego adjustment that was going to try harder and make it work out, then there are less options. And what happens if you were just to imagine the worst experience you could have, being given grief, not accepted, blamed for things, and not loved? What would you have to deal with?
Well, for me, it wouldn't be having a focus in what I would, if effectively being banished. That's the feeling I would have, and not being loved, and therefore not having a focus. That would be my contention with respect to other people. With myself, I would still feel that I'm valuable and acceptable, and am dependable, but it's just simply there's not much you can do to convince somebody else.
Excellent. He just gave the most perfect answer, where he adapted, triple adapted 369. So you can see that he has 963, 936 is his types, but he just answered it in that way, saying that he knew who he truly is underneath, but that it would be painful to feel banished. And banished gives a very, well, I guess it's not permanent, because sometimes you could be banished from a country and then the king could let you come back, but overall, not a good thing. So, and yet he identified with fair. So all I want you to get out of this is whatever people put as their first 5 words are the compensations for things that they experienced young. Now, maybe they were good at it, but it's also what you feel you need to be to survive. And it's all unconscious. So they can be adaptations, especially if you have 3, 6, or 9, But if you don't have 3, 6, or 9, you're hexad type, like I'm the 874, I am not going to be good at that. I'm just going to say I'm opinionated, outspoken, direct, to the point, fair, just, creative, and compassionate. And then, wait, that's not 5, that's 8. And then if someone's asked me to narrow it down to 5, that would be hard for me, because to me, they're all one thing. And yet I know I'm a lot of the things that other people say, but I don't use that vocabulary. And the key thing is that working with people internationally, which I was able to do at conferences and events when people came from other parts of the world. But then when I started teaching in different countries, but even before that, once we had phone connections that were decent, I was doing coaching by phone. And then we had Skype. Now we were used to hanging up over and over and over again and calling back. But then by maybe 2015, we had Zoom. Then it's much better since COVID. It's more stable. So we can do coaching this way. And these words are universal. So if I took a segment of 1,000 people that took the test, and I looked at their words and the cards that they chose and hypothesized what their tritype would be and their instinctual stacking and potentially even their Myers-Briggs, and sorted them, and then started interviewing people according to my hypothesis, it was extraordinary, because words matter. And if English is a second language, you're still going to choose the words that you like. Like I remember when I was learning Spanish, this person that I know to be a 9 now just said, oh, I wish we had a word like simpatico. It takes 3 words to say the same thing. And I thought, yeah, I was trying to think why that would be so important to him. Whereas I wanted the commands, the imperatives to make it easy, quick. I didn't care as much about something that would make things more copacetic. I guess I didn't expect it to be. But if you look back in your own childhood, how you did or didn't match your parents is important, because we can take on our parents' values, but that doesn't mean it's the defense strategy we use, which is why I stress finding the defense strategy. And so he wants fairness. He used it twice. Greatest strength. Fairness, like everyone to be included. So he thinks that's good because he wants to include everyone. It is. And what is this 9's greatest fear is lovelessness. He mentioned that early on. And the fear of being separate from others. Now, nobody wants to be separate, but the 9 doesn't take a side because they don't want to be separate. And as managers, they'll hear everyone out, but people will walk away thinking the 9 agrees with them. And then they'll say to the other person, oh, Mr. 9 agrees with me. And the other person goes, no, he doesn't. He agrees with me, whatever their issue was. And the truth is, having done a lot of business management where this happened, the 9's going with consensus. They don't want anyone to be odd man out. They don't want any conflict. They want it to smooth out as quickly as possible. They believe in, not putting all their eggs in one basket, spreading things out. That way, nothing can ever go terribly wrong. But what the 9 isn't comfortable with is making a decision and asserting their own viewpoint, because they don't want to do anything that'll cause them to feel separate from others. So for each one of us, we have a gift, and then that gift has a corresponding dilemma. So fairness is always appreciated by people. But let me ask you, Val, is it easy for you to publicly with two people takes one person's side over the other?
I would be voicing both of their opinions and giving the pros and cons.
Right.
But as you were talking, I was thinking, even just at work, I would be looking at constraints. What are the constraints? What decisions we need to take? Why one is better given the conditions, whether it's time or some kind of constraints, why we have to opt for one as opposed to the other. So that's how I would take a decision, which is difficult because obviously you're hurting the other person's feelings.
Well, it's tough, and the 9 doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So it's raising why you have to make a decision is important, whereas some types just say, no, that's fundamentally wrong. And it might come from some sort of visceral moral code that a 1 might have, or the 2 might say, well, I know what the person feels. We need to approach it this way because I track emotions. And the 3 might say, well, but this is what they want. This is what they expect. So this is what we need to deliver. And the 4 is saying, wait, I need to be unique and individual to find my place because I'm not good at that thing that other person got that I didn't. Like, I'm not good in math because I transpose numbers, but boy, someone else is like straight A's in math. So I can't have math be a part of anything that has to do with my identity. Yet actually, I work with pattern recognition, but you don't have to have your calculations perfect. You can feel it. And whatever we do, we're going to like what we're naturally good at and what people like about us, unless it's something that doesn't feel right. And then you'll see the type there. So he said his weakness is expressing feelings. So here he's fair, wants everyone included, but doesn't feel comfortable expressing his own feelings. Why? Rarely got down to the bottom of them. Now, that's an interesting answer. Rarely got down to the bottom of them. And the question then is why? Like, I remember when having a feeling, yeah, I might put it out of my mind. But when I decided to think about it, yeah, I had to get down to the bottom of it. But guess what type doesn't? Type 9, because you don't want to go to the place that separates you from others. So if you really go to your feelings, and then that means it'll cause some sort of internal conflict with your relationship with someone else, you're not going to be motivated to do it. But some types, like 4s, for example, or people with 4 in their tritype, yeah, they want to analyze it to death. Chazo called the 4 the over reasoner. They need a reason for their suffering. They're going to keep going till they get to the bottom of it. And if there doesn't seem to be a bottom, they'll just figure out something that explains why they're suffering, with the idea being they don't want to suffer that way again. So if they understand it, they can manage their suffering. And the other thing that happens is if you can't ask for attention, but you need attention, if you show suffering, people might attend to you without expecting to control you. And it's a very important defense strategy that the 4 uses, where they want the attention, but they don't want to be controlled or manipulated or have to deliver something in particular. So everything about every type is wonderfully extraordinary and works, but it's helpful to know what is problematic. So this would always be a problem if someone wanted you to go to your feelings, or if you want to create change, you kind of have to go there to have a new perspective on it. So rarely means you can do it, but you don't like to do it for some reason, right?
It's often finding people willing to having a safe space and people that I can do that, express and try get down to the bottom of things.
Excellent. And then, he has a lot of other things. Now, the creature I just was curious about color. And in some types, it didn't matter. Like sevens might say all colors or several colors. And fours would use like a shade of purple or black. And if they didn't like purple or black, they would give a very specific name, like transparent viridian for a type of teal, a bright teal. So nothing was ordinary in their choice. And then the symbol is Y for each person. And I was just curious, and it was amazing how many people have never thought about a symbol, but we live with symbols every day. Whether, like a friend got me this lip gloss because it had an 8 on it. So an 8 can be a symbol. A brand can be a symbol, the kind of water we would drink, the shape we liked. If you liked math, you might like a circle or a triangle or a hexad shape. It's going to be different for each person as to what they identify with. We all have symbols, we just don't realize it. And we all have an image, whether consciously orchestrated and maintained or by what we don't do, because image is in the eyes of the beholder. If we're determining whether it's a good image or a bad image, if it's coming from us and we don't care, that's fine. But if we don't want to lose credibility and someone's judging us by our image, then it's painful for all types, even the people who say I have no image. And having been in the image industry, that was one of the first things I had to teach people is we all have an image. And do we want to be judged by that? And how do we want to be judged? And what can we do to be ourselves and still have an image that's not going to have people be unfair to you? So that was my focus. But like other image, my whole focus was personal empowerment. Other image consultants would say, oh, I just want people to have fun, type 7. Oh, well, I know what people need and I want to get them the right things so that they can have joy in their life, type 2. Well, I want to just help them look smart and stylish and professional if they need to be, type 3. The 1 would say, well, I want them to know what's right so they're not criticized, so that they look good, but they know everything. I teach them etiquette too and a lot of other things. And then they'd say, but Katherine, what's your personal empowerment thing? And I said, well, I need to share with you another system. I'm the type that's all about fairness by everyone being self-possessed and personally empowered. And even though I was in a field that I didn't really ever want to be in, I still ended up teaching all the people who worked with me or under me how to feel self-possessed and empowered and be able to handle difficult situations. And so I'm going to bring that into whatever I do in life. And we all do that, is basically what I'm saying, is that, yep, issues of being disempowered, the core fear of 8. So what am I going to want to do as an adult? Empower people. What will bother me is when people don't want to become empowered, when they want to have someone be their power, which is perfectly fine. Many people do it. But as an 8, I'd rather teach people how to become empowered. And so just think about what you would do. So then he also has approachable, which we see with 2, 6, and 9. His word is his bond, and that goes back to having those 5 gut type cards. Desires to be cool, like cool in temperature, or cool and like your presentation and personality.
Chilled out. Cool.
Okay, see the distinction? One person might mean, yeah, I want to be cool. Someone else might, yeah, I don't want to be hot. And he gave a third reason, chilled out. And which type wants to be chilled out more than any other? The 9. So if we go deeper on all these words, this is the lexicon of type. And when I ran my first studies as that executive, because I had to so quickly hire and train people. I just didn't want to travel that much. And if I did it right the first time, I had left traveling. But having said that, there was just a way in which people would define all these words. So I began with the first 5 and strength and weakness. That was core for any interview. But then to really develop someone and have them succeed in their job and get promoted and be empowered, they needed to understand all of it. So just think of what you do in your life and what was important to you. Like sometimes 6s will kind of caution others. Yeah, I don't trust that guy. Or do you think that's whatever? And that is a way to manage life. Or wait, I'm not going to let that guy take advantage of me. That's usually someone who has 6 and 8 together. So there's just wonderful combinations that once you know them are meaningful. So when I had over 1,000 responses to the adjectives, not knowing the Enneagram, there were clusters. So when I learned the Enneagram, I thought, wow, now those clusters are 3-dimensional. And if we get to the right definition of the word. So that's what I encourage you on this part, is to make sure you understand the definition and what the person is trying to avoid. And you can only do that by asking a question on a question on a question. If you say, oh, do you feel this way or that way? You won't get there. Could take forever. You just say why, because, and that's a whole nother study. But thank you, Val, very, very much. To me, he's demonstrated what's really important with the 3, 6, and 9. And his reason for even his 6 type words ended up being 9. And that's important to not just say, oh, that's a 6 word, that's a 2 word, but actually anyone dependable might choose the word dependable. But when you have dependable, helpful, thoughtful, reactionary, and fair, you know that you've got an interesting combination of 6 and 9, but you just have to find the heart type. And remember, he only had one heart type, and at one time or another, it was 2, 3, or 4. In the very first part of the upper Enneagram spread, he chose a 4 card. Okay, so here's where his 4 card showed up. But then
I had a
here's
3
where his
card
2
out.
cards showed up. And then when we were talking, or he was choosing sentences, here's his 3 card. So in his case, having 6 and 9, and then trying to figure out his heart type card takes a little finesse. He actually did it quite quickly, but doing it on your own is hard if you're this tri-type, because you don't know these nuances. But if you have 6 and 9, or that note that you might, it's still going to be hard to find your heart type card. So I can very quickly look at someone else's if they'd like. Is there some, or we can go to questions. I saw Judy first. Can I, and then I'll go to you, Ashley. How's that? Because she did it this way rather than the little.
Hi, thank you. I couldn't find my raised hand.
So would you like to show me your test?
Oh, shoot.
Or did you have a question?
Well, the test, shoot, I can pull it up here. I don't have it ready, but I took your other class, and I guess my question is, going back to Val's, his banner didn't show 936.
It sure
So,
did.
right. Okay. My banner shows 469, but I took the Shift Network class with you where we went in detail, and I'm convinced I'm a 649. But the test said my primary type is 4 and my tri-type was 469, but I'm convinced I'm 649.
Yeah, and remember, the test is only telling you what you chose. It's not saying
Right.
you lost something. But did you get the special notices?
7.
Okay, so you are the 6 or the 9, so you're right. You're not leading with 4.
Yes.
And what made you put 4 in third position?
Oh,
What did you put?
I put it in the second position.
Oh, okay. And why did you put it over the 9?
Good question. I'm starting to look at the 9 of myself and recognize it, but I think I just had some really strong wounds as a child, like not being held, that kind of stuff. And I was very, I always felt like I was different. And so I always related to the hopeless romantic melancholy that will never get my needs met. And that's why I thought I was a 4 all along, but the process with my head.
Yes, that's a great distinction. And remember when I was saying that I would ask if I see that particular 4 card that Val chose, but any 4 card, did you have a painful childhood, or are you going through a painful experience? And it's interesting because the 6 will immediately go back to details of their childhood and the way they were or were not tended to, like what they were afraid of and what they didn't get. Like other types won't do that. They will have a more current event or describe like a fundamental flaw or something else.
Okay.
But the 6, you're right about leading with 6. The 6 immediately goes to what they didn't get that they needed.
Okay, because the 4, there's some parts of a 4 I don't relate to at all, because I don't dress up real fancy and I don't do a lot of the drama. I'm not a drama queen, but I'm very emotional and sensitive. And I know you said the 6 is that. And I want to get along. So I'm starting to think maybe I am at 6, 9, 4.
Yeah, if you don't relate to the envy or the desire to be elite and exclusive.
No, I tried to always be good at what I did, but no, not elite.
And let me throw out another piece of information. The INFP is very 4-ish. So because you have 6 and 9, you just have to try a little harder, look a little deeper and a little further,
right,
to check out your heart type.
Yeah, well, the desire for beauty and excellence and love, and I don't want to be the achiever. It's too much pressure, and I don't feel like I can give love like a 2. I mean, I'm just not that interested in other people.
Well, so you're saying that you do have a desire for beauty and excellence.
Oh, totally. I'm
that's 4.
a seeker.
That's 4. You just have to look at the flip side of it.
Yeah.
And find the way you're intolerant to people or situations that are ugly, or by your own definition, even though it's 3rd for you.
Definitely. Plus, I'm gay, so I felt very different. I was always rebelling against the feminine thing. So the feminine beauty, ideal beauty, I rebelled against because I felt like I didn't fit.
But did you appreciate it in others, and in buildings and in literature or in nature?
Yeah, but not so much physical. Well, not physical beauty, but beauty in nature, beauty in concepts, beauty in like the virtues of the Enneagram. I mean, I love Russ Hudson and how he teaches that kind of mystical beauty. I love.
Yeah, well, that does sound like the seeker.
Yeah,
sure.
I'm definitely the seeker. I was a religion major in college.
There you go. That's a good match. Too. Well, thank you, Judy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so there you are, Ashley.
Hello. Okay, so I have a question. My test had one special note, and it was that this confirmed you have type 6 and or type 9 in your tri-type. It may be difficult to make important decisions. So I was wondering about that. What if it's just one notice, and how do you decide if
what was in your blue banner? Can you show me?
8-5. Yeah, I can. Let me see. I've never done this before, so let me
Because then I
try
can do
to
it.
do
I
this.
can really quickly see what you need to pay attention to.
Okay, let's see
It will
here.
help you sort
Make
through.
sure.
So you identify with the 852. Well, the thing about 8 and 2, 8 in particular, is already has a line to 2 and a line to 5. So if you're an 8 with 5 in your tri-type, not just as a line, then there would be a retentive part of you. Because the 5's defense strategy is to isolate and be retentive. And any free expression is squashed in favor of being private, separate, and not having any interference from others so that you can pursue your own interests as a 5. So it would mean your head type decisions would be based on data that interests you. Now, with the internet, we all go after data now. We're all investigators. We just go, wait a minute, I could be watching Netflix and then I suddenly see something I don't remember exactly in history. Didn't this happen before that? Pause, go on the internet, search, get the data, come back, and then finish the show. It's just like a whole new world. Okay, so the first thing I want to see, or scroll down to your special notice. Let me see if it was in the early.
Right
Okay.
here.
All right. Now go to the tri-type. I want to see the 3 cards you chose. That the banner up higher up.
Oh, up top?
Yeah.
This one?
Yes, it's the third one. Second one, rather. Tri-type.
Oh, the tri-type.
Yeah.
Okay,
click that
sorry.
one. Okay, so you got
Got it.
8, the self-reliant, and it's a softer 8, by the way. He looks imposing, but if you notice, the tiger is like relaxed, not fierce, and ready to
Right.
find prey. And the knight is like just showing a loyal gesture, not just, fight position. And then the 5, are you good with math and science?
Yes, very good with math.
Okay. And do you like it or just good at it?
I love math. I love
Okay.
math.
And what do you like about it?
My favorite part of math is trigonometry, figuring out the problems and being able to solve them. I was good at calculus, very good at it. I do like science, physics only because it's based in math. But I don't practice it. Right now, the only time I use math is through teaching my daughter because I homeschool her. So my oldest. But yeah, math was always one of my strong suits because it's pretty much, if you know the formula, you can solve it. Like if you don't, then you're going to get it wrong. It's not difficult.
So what causes you anxiety around this? And the reason I say that is that because I know micro expressions, you're considering both sides, you're using both hemispheres, you're very animated. And what MBTI do you identify with? Do you know?
I don't do
You
MBTI.
probably like knowing. You're answering it more like a 6 that's good at math. So it could just be that your 6 and 5 are close. Having said that, what in the words did you like about that card?
Self-reliant. That was the one that stood out the most.
No, the 5 card, the next one down.
Oh, the 5 card. Okay.
Yeah, because
Self-sufficient.
Yeah. Okay.
Self-sufficient.
So you don't depend on anybody or being.
Secretive.
And what
What
do
was
you
that?
secretive? You don't depend on anybody where you do stuff for them, they do
No.
stuff for you.
No, I depend on myself. I just never grew up in a way where I could depend on people. So I've always just depended on myself. I took care of my brothers and stuff. So, my younger brother, when my mom was going through what she went through. So for me, it was never an option. Like you just have to be self-reliant. Like it wasn't a choice. Like I didn't choose that. It was just my life.
And how old were you when you had to be so self-reliant?
I was in the 6th grade. My mother,
11.
we had issues. Yeah.
And that's
She was absent for that time. She was absent for 3 months. And so I had to learn how to cook and take care of my little brother.
Yeah. Now you may feel that you just bit back, like rolled your lips, and that's when we're feeling anxious. So I know it was a tough time for you, as it should be, would be. But what about before that? Did you have to be self-reliant then too?
I
Yes.
get nervous when I talk to people. Like, I'm very private and like reserved, so I don't really like being on the camera that much. So I have anxiety on the camera. So
Yeah.
that's also a problem. So like but I needed to ask the question. So
Yes, no,
um
it's excellent. And all I'm offering is that your results are letting you know that that type of anxiety is often six-like, but it could be anybody. Anybody can have social anxiety,
right.
but finding out why, because it's important. But eights, yeah, it's like the defense strategy. If we had social anxiety, we wouldn't know it. Camera,
Yeah.
no camera, whatever. So
Prior to 11, I wasn't self-reliant because my parents were together. So I'm the only girl of four children. So for me, I just was always by myself anyway, because I wasn't allowed to go out and play. I did math problems and I did writing and schoolwork basically. So I wasn't allowed. So I just
and you didn't sneak
was
out
always to
or
myself.
anything?
I did when I was 14 and I got caught.
Oh yeah, you're
And my
not
mom
supposed
called
to
the
get caught.
police. I went out through the basement window and I was waiting out there for somebody to come pick me up and he didn't show up. And then my mom happened to come down the stairs and see me outside. And yeah, so she tried to scare me straight. So she called the police and he was like, you can get arrested for that. And I'm just like, okay, please, whatever. I'm like, okay.
Oh my God. Well, yeah. What I'm saying is that growing up as the only girl with three brothers, there can be a value that you need to be more masculine to have privileges or be considered equal. And when that happens, it can undermine whichever Enneagram type you have. But some just rebel the other way. So I was third child. I said, whatever you can do, I can do too. But of course, that wasn't true. But I found a way to get even. So the
Right.
driving force of 8 is to get even, not over and over and over again, just once. So like if I asked my brother if he'd help me with something and he just said no, and I go, why not? I need your help. Oh, well, whatever. So then it might be a month or a year later, if he asked me for something, I'd say, yeah, no. And he goes, well, why not? And I said, well, do you remember a year ago when I asked you? And he goes, what? You're thinking about that. But it's to make things square, even. It's not vindictive. You usually have to have 4 in the tritype to vindictively, or 6, repeat things. But 8 just wants it to be even. And I'll do right by you if you do right by me. And the 8, there are some 8s that are introverted, but they don't show it. People wouldn't know it. And then there are many other factors that can influence that. So now that I've seen the cards that you chose, and that 2 card usually is someone that's self-pres. Did you come out self-pres, by the way?
Yes, self-pres
Okay.
sexual.
And thank you. Self-pres has more self-consciousness than the other types. So that's great. Now go to the Ennea spreads. Double 8 at the top, but you got the boxer 8 as your second choice. Then when you were choosing between the 4, 5, 9, you chose the 9, and that's kind of the peace seeking, wanting things comfortable 9. Oh, wow. So this is another reason that you got that note, is that you have 2 9 cards and 2 8 cards and a 1 card. So you're not unlike Val. You have 5 gut type cards. And the heart card you have is 2 instead of 4. But otherwise,
Yeah.
this is very important. So now here's the thing, is sometimes self-pres can be so strong that it generates kind of a focus on visceral body, certainty, security, and reliability. So that's very noteworthy to me right there, because once again, what's missing? There's no head type card. So we know it's 6 because you would have mentioned somewhere along the line that 5, like you did later, or a 7. Do you think of yourself as introverted, Ashley?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
But I would have called it just reserved. I don't use the word introvert. I'm just very reserved. I just like to be to myself and do what I want to do when I want to do it and not be bothered by people and their expectations. So just leave me alone and I'll leave you alone. And I just prefer to be alone. I
And
mean,
what
because
about-
if I'm not alone, then go ahead.
What about friends, school friends?
I have one friend that I've known since freshman year of college, and we only met because I had to share a dorm with her and I was pissed. And I went to the people and I'm like, I'm not sharing. I need my own dorm. They're like, freshmen don't get their own dorm. I said, well, I need mine. Otherwise I'm leaving. They were like, well, you're going to love this girl. And I fell in love with her. And she's my only friend to this day. We're like sisters. I call her my sister more than a friend.
Excellent. Because we don't need to have a lot. In fact, with self-preservation, a friend or a spouse can be like one of your resources, a source of pleasure, but it doesn't have to be twinship like the sexual. So it's interesting. I think you do have your instincts absolutely correct. Now, let me see the second Enneagram spread and see how it varied. Okay, you got your double 8s again, and then you got 2 5s and 2 2s. Okay, scroll. Let me see your sentences. Oh. Can you make it a little bit bigger? Or you just tell me what it says. I think the first one says, yeah, okay, I can read it now. I can probably read it even better now. Aha. All right. So 8 came first, confident, then cerebral, 5, and then warm, which is 2. And then you, under the core fears, you did choose the 8, and then you chose the 5, and then you chose the 2. So you had a perfect. How long have you known the Enneagram?
I got introduced probably like 2 years ago, but I just left it alone. At that time, I read something about the 7-wing 8, and I was like, oh, I guess that kind of sounds like me, except I'm not extroverted. So it never fit. So I just kind of like, screw this stuff. And then it came back around after I had like a really bad health scare. And I was trying to just, I don't know, but kill time in the hospital. So I started getting back into the Enneagram. And then yeah, so probably, I guess if you count that 2 years, but if not, I guess about a year, maybe.
So, and depending on who we learn from, it can be tougher or easier to learn based on our own type. So now go to your show answers. Okay, so your private was the first. And were you private your whole life as a little girl too?
Yes, very.
Okay, and what's your definition of intellectual?
Well, my definition of intellectual is that I'm always learning. I got to keep learning. Like I cannot stop learning. And because of that, I find that I've got a lot of knowledge in a lot of things. And so for me, intellectual is just a way of being. It's just who I am. I can't separate the two. It's just what I know. It's who I am. And I got made fun of for it, but I really don't give two craps.
And when did you start showing that? When were you made fun of it? Because people will.
It started on kindergarten on the playground. I went to play with some girls and they were like, no, because you think you're better than us. And I'm like, what the hell? And they were like, oh, because you think you're smarter and more intelligent than us. But they didn't say intelligent, they were like smarter. And I'm just like, what? And I was like, fine, screw y'all. And then I just doubled down on just learning and just doing what I do. And I mean, and just realize it's part of who I am and I can't change that. I mean, maybe if I had sisters and my parents like go out and play, I wouldn't be intellectual because I wouldn't have anything else. Like I that's all I had was being studious. And always learning. And that's just like something I instill in my daughters, is like never stop learning.
And because what did learning give you? What would you say?
Power. It gives me power. Nobody can control me because I know too much. Like, you can't get over on me. It's just not going to happen.
And what is knowing too much? How does it give you power? They can't do
How does
what? Yeah.
they just can't take advantage of me. I've had situations where people thought that they were going to take control of me or try to outsmart me or something. And I'm just like, okay. And I may not tell you that I know better. Like, sometimes it just depends. Like, I might say it, but I might not. It just
And what would
depends on the
make you
situation.
say it or not say it?
If I am feeling challenged, maybe I might say it in a way where I let you know that you're not going to, control me. Over the years, I've gotten better with that because my husband, we used to butt heads all the time, like literally. I'm very masculine energy. He's very feminine energy. And in the beginning, he was like taken aback by me, and it was kind of hard because we fought for the first 7 years. We've been together 18 years now, and we fought for the first 7 years. And I'm a Taurus as well. So he's a
Yeah,
Pisces.
and you also like the bull. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's a symbol, because that's the first thing came to my mind was the bull, because I am like that. I'm gentle. I am reserved. I'm to myself. But if you poke me too much, I might just let you have it. And I've had issues with the male species. Men tend to think they get intimidated by me because of my intelligence.
You can
I would
stop
say.
sharing now, but go ahead. Stop the screen, but I'm still want to listen to what you're saying.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you want me to what? Yeah, go watch TV. Mommy be right there. You want me to stop sharing? You said?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think that men are intimidated by me because I am outspoken. I all my life I've been told like I need to my mouth is going to write a check that my ass can't cash, and to this day I haven't been in that situation. So yeah, it just gives me power. Like, there are women that can get taken advantage of, and I just feel like I won't get taken advantage of, because if I let you, that's different. Like, I'll let you think you're in control, but at the end of the day, I'm the one pulling the strings.
Yeah, I don't doubt that you're the 8, by the way, or the 2. But I seriously encourage you to look at just being a really smart 6 as your head type. Because the minute we think about something depending on a situation, and if 8 and 6 come together, that amplifies the desire to not be misled, taken advantage of, or manipulated in a particular way. So I just throw it out there because it's worth looking at. And why you would identify with the 5, of course, is the math and that it's your ability, but also you are reserved. And reserved and introverted are very much the same thing in most, when you compare them. So the very introverted 8 is going to assert and get big when they feel controlled, manipulated, harmed, or someone having the intent to harm. But the fears of being powerless and at the mercy of injustice, where you can't assert what you're capable of asserting in another situation. And 6 has the fear of being helpless. Like, if everything goes wrong, is there someone else that might align with you? And that's really important to people with 6, is to not be misled, to at least have a resource they can go to. Now everyone goes to the internet. It's not always right, by the way, because people will go with something that okay, 100 people say this, that must be the truth, but maybe 100 people have copied the wrong person in the very beginning. And so the facts aren't what we think they are. But on the other hand, we feel less dependent on people. We can even have relationships or frenemies or enemies online. And social groups, some people want to get home and just go on to the groups they're in, wherever they are. And other people need physical people. They need to get outside. They were traumatized by COVID and having to stay inside. And other people, it was like no big deal, now I can do more what I want to do. And no one's expecting me to show up here or there. It's different for each person. So if you were social and positively identified with social, then it'd be a real issue having to stay home. But why we had to stay home is one thing, but how we felt about it and what we did is another thing. And they're all important. So I could be wrong, but I would look at the possibility of the 8-6-2. And what you would see in yourself is someone that can rise up and protect others, even though you want to be left alone.
Yeah, that's been my story. Like in 11th grade, a guy hit my brother, and he was little at that time. Now he's 6'4", but he was tinier. And I said to the guy, like, you're going to apologize to my brother. And he refused to. And then I got into a fight and I got suspended. And I told the principal, he should have never hit my brother. And I gave him opportunity and he did not listen. So he got what he got.
Yeah,
And that's what
me.
it is.
I did the same thing, only I was a little younger. I was 7 and my brother was 4. And he was hit by a 7-year-old boy. And literally, he came home crying, a little 4-year-old. And I said, who hit you? Like my brother that was a 9 said, oh, gee, that's too bad. My 2 brothers were playing catch. And my other brother said, well, what did you do wrong? He was 1, thinking that my little brother did something wrong. How much wrong could you do at age 4? And so I said, who hit you? Show me. We went over and he showed me, and I walked up to this guy and I said, you hit my little brother? And he goes, yeah, why? And I just grabbed him by the collar and said, don't you ever touch my little brother again. And you know what's funny is that's one of my little brother's favorite stories, because he's 6'4" too. But it was just like, it was impulsive. He just happened to have a shirt I could grab. But I didn't hit him or anything. I just threatened him. And I said, and if you don't want to have to deal with this ever again, be nice to my little brother. Because if I ever hear you're not, you're going to hear about it, not just from me, but his older brothers. And you know what? My dad doesn't like a bully, so that'd be a problem too. And then the kid was just scared. And then I thought, oh, he's scared. Someone probably bullied him. And I said, man, if anyone bullies you, let me know, because I'll handle them too. So it's just visceral is what I'm trying to say. But if you grew up with a parent that was that way too, it's reinforced.
My mother.
Okay. Yeah.
She's a very masculine woman.
And so that's what you want to find out, how much you may have introjected versus your own individuality. Is she an extrovert as well?
She's an extrovert. She likes people. She needs to be around people, but then she has to go back home to recharge. But she's so social. She's out all the time. I don't get it. She always tried to tell me to go. I'm like, for what? I have everything I need right here.
and that's self-pres. She's probably not self-pres.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ashley, for sharing that.
Thank you.
Don't rule out 8-5-2. Instead, just start to pay attention if you are tracking in a way where you're becoming retentive and not being yourself. Because the 5 just holds, like they're holding in their breath. And it's part of 5 that was kind of lost in the dissemination of the Enneagram, how retentive they are. And they're little professors. They're smart, but you can be any type and be smart, and obviously you are. But see if you can find the retentiveness, not just reserve, but the desire to isolate because you can't tolerate people. Not that you want to go do other things, but that it's like they're in your thoughts and you can't have a clear mind because they feel easily invaded. Whereas the 6 is just tracking people that are just going to give them grief or judge them or try and control or manipulate them. It's a different.
Yeah, that sounds more like it. I think you're right there. The 862 probably is more like it because it's not, the only time I hold my breath is when I'm lifting weights. Then I hold my breath. My husband's like, breathe, Ashley, breathe. And I'm just like, I am. And it's like, I don't realize I'm holding my breath, but that's the only time I hold my breath. But with people, I don't want people to need stuff from me because then it's like, it's kind of weird. It's a weird relationship with that. And so, but I think that's just because I'm so self-pres. Like, I think I'm a strong self-pres. So
Yes,
it's
yes.
kind of like, yeah.
And self-present 8 together creates, in a way, like the junkyard dog, meaning that you're going to protect your stuff, and but you can be by yourself in a junkyard. It's like you don't have to have the people. So
Yeah.
there are times when the self-present can seem 5-ish, which you wouldn't know because that was a part of my research from many years ago. But it's very true. So then the question is, do they also have 5 in the tritype? So let me know what you decide later, because I always like to have that data. Even though I can't do the math calculations the way I want, I can emotionally remember whatever I experienced with someone. So if you later say, you know, Katherine, I've given a lot of thought, and for this reason, I think it's more 5, or you're right, I think it's 6 for this reason. That goes into my memory banks so that when I'm working with people in the future, I have it to offer. So I do appreciate everything people share with me.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Harmony. I think I lost.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm kind of shy. I just got up, so can't show myself or face yet.
Okay, what's your question?
Well, I just took the test while you were interviewing the others,
Uh-huh.
and then I got 478.
And the 478 isn't usually that shy. Is it? Yeah. How close were you on the 8 and the 9?
Like probably 8 with a 9 wing.
And 4 that identifies with a 3 is not that shy. So you are an
5 wing.
that is INTP. But do you remember, or can you see when you took the test what your instinct came out as?
It's self-person and intimate.
Yeah, so that does make sense. Oh yeah, I see it there. I take it back. So what is your question, do you think?
Well, I got 2 special notices saying that I might have 6.
Which notices did you get?
Let me check my results.
Yeah, because it's important.
It says your Enneagram test responses indicate specific patterns that reveal you have elusive, emotional, and complex type 6 as your head type in your tritype. And then the second one says type 6 is a type that is most inclined to mistype in any testing instrument. Those are the only notices I got.
Okay, so yeah, that means you had several patterns that are indicative of 6 as opposed to 7. So it would make more sense, by the way, if you, how emotional are you?
Not very.
So what do you doubt then? What were you inconsistent about or in your life? Where can you kind of go both ways on something, or you consider the other perspective, or do you consider multiple perspectives?
I can consider one perspective.
So in everything in life, just one perspective?
Yeah, more or less, I think.
Then how do you make decisions if you only have one perspective? Do you just feel like you take the risk that you could be wrong?
No, I do like actually I consult like I research stuff myself.
And what kind of research? What helps you?
Like I use the internet to like see how to do things better, do things right.
Well, the reason I ask is that we all want resources, but you say you only have one. At what point do you make up your mind that you're just going to have the one perspective? Is it after you've researched, or do you already have that perspective and then you research to kind of prove or validate that your perspective is the right way to go?
Well, I have well, I do have a perspective and then the research validates it.
And do you ever like do the research and say, maybe my perspective isn't the best way to go?
Oh yeah.
And how do you decide? How frequently does that happen? And then which do you end up doing?
Not that often. Usually it's like I realize I am
So would you say you have strong opinions then?
sort of.
And how quickly do you have them?
Quickly enough.
What's quickly enough? I wouldn't know. I have them very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
And what will make you modify them?
Not much. Only if it's gonna be a problem to use. I mean, like if only it's gonna. I don't want it to hurt anyone.
Well, it's interesting because the 4-7-8 leading with 4 with some self-preservation and an introvert is kind of an enigma. The driving force is still to be searching for data, not unlike the seeker, trying to find things that answer questions and are interesting to you, or maybe you need to know, but it's all the same thing. Then there comes a point where you learn whatever you perceive as important, and then you feel the need to share it with others. Like my poor friends and family, and anyone that knows me, they know their Enneagram type. Whatever I learned, they're gonna know about it. And it's like a need to share it. So now being an introvert makes us a little different as to how vocal you might be about it. So how introverted are you?
I'm probably an ambivert.
That's suggesting again 6, and that's what that notice is saying. But
I don't think so.
oh, that's okay. That's okay.
I mean, I really relate to the 7 because it's like I'm always looking for new experiences and never satisfied.
Well, if you're a 4, that would be true just by virtue of being a 4.
Yeah. I do also have a problem with envy. I'm thinking that
Chronic
others have what I don't
frustration
have.
and dissatisfaction is what the 4 is faced with.
Yeah.
And then depending on the other types in the tritype, the 4 is then mobilized, maybe more one way than another. But like it was harder for me to see my 4, and it's so obvious, but because the 8 and the 7 were kind of creating a viewpoint that just seemed like 8s, 7s, an 8 with a 7 wing, 7 with an 8 wing. And yet I had to have a heart type. But when I recognized that really it was molded in with that 8-7, then I could recognize parts of myself that I had dismissed. So it is important to consider the self-preservation if you are that tritype, but without seeing your test and the words you wrote and what you had, where you had it, I would only be guesstimating, but it would create a very, it would make you ambiverted in a way, because as I said, the self-pres makes you more held in, but the 7 and 8 push you out.
Yeah.
And like all my research was from going outwards, but my desire to understand the internal experience of type was coming from my 4. I just didn't get it.
Mhm. Okay,
So-
and then
Go
what
ahead.
is it? Okay, well, I'm thinking that that gathering data thing is probably just a strong 5 wing.
To be our type, we have both wings. That was lost in the dissemination of the Enneagram. But one thing I did find is that people identify with one wing internally and another wing externally.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's there, but we might talk, walk, dress like one wing. And then the other is still part of our decision-making process. Because to have our type, it's the tension between the 2 wings. And
then
so we do identify with one wing more than another, for sure. And if you're an introvert, that would make you identify more with the 5 wing, yet you thought 3 wing, right? So what was it about the 3 wing that you identified with?
It's like I also want to be successful the best that I can be.
And is that-
Results oriented.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you look at the types again with fresh eyes, see if you use the defense strategy of all 3 types. Like the defense strategy is the defense mechanism modified with the Enneagram. So what Naranjo did is he took these psychological defense structures that were mechanisms, and then he took the Enneagram types and put them together and more clearly defined how they would show up. And the way to see the defense strategy is the way I began. You look at your idealized image, what you think is kind of cool about yourself, or you need to have about yourself, or you don't have self-esteem. And then you kind of get around the superego to find out, okay, what if you're not considered a kind person? Let's say that's your first word. And you're considered unkind. Well, the ego can't handle that because that could mean certain death, because the hindbrain can't distinguish between a real threat and an imagined threat. So you then just try to do it for yourself. It's hard to do, but you just ask the question on the question on the question without explanation, because we always want to explain things, especially if you're a 4, you'd really want to explain things. But
Yeah, so
trying to analyze, because I can see that part in myself. I was oblivious to it, but it's there. But when you find like the core underneath the core, underneath the core, underneath the core, and you find the fear, and that it always goes to the same fear, no matter what word you use. And you can do it yourself on Zoom if you don't want to do it with someone, and you'll see your expressions. You can talk about anything, and your expressions will immediately alert you that you're not comfortable with something, or you're very comfortable with something. So, but to be that camera shy with that tri-type is just so rare, I can't tell you, but it can exist. Anything can exist. I've seen rare combinations of things, but just for your knowledge and information, it's worth double checking.
yeah. So I'm thinking that probably 4 wing 5, and then 7 wing 8 wing 9. But yeah.
Well, that's a pretty fierce type. And
Yeah, I am very. I'm very comfortable with expressing my anger.
Yeah, it's a
And-
pretty, but it's also a very creative, innovative, original type. Other 4s want to be the 4, 7, 8 tri-type because it's quite original, but they are willing to put up with a lot of people not understanding them and criticizing them and thinking they're not cooperating. So it's hard as a child to be that tri-type. As an adult, it usually works out fine. So I wish you the best.
I was just wondering, though, that how do I show my test results?
You would have to screen share them.
Okay.
So you had unique, tasteful, intuitive, optimistic, open-minded. Yeah, okay, but what would you have said as a kid? Kids don't say they're self-absorbed and they don't say they're tasteful. That came out of my research. People don't even say tasteful. What would you say instead?
Well, I would say that I'm very like excitable. It's like I just get excited every new thing. I don't want to try out everything.
Yeah, that's the 7 in there, you're right.
Restless too.
Let's see. Fear of being disrespected, having no significant identity. Okay, connect to others, be yourself. Joyful and unique, show my individuality. Yeah. Now go to the page that has any spreads.
Yeah, I was confused about those special notices. It's like, I mean,
No, they're not random. You have to have hit quite a few points for them to show up. Originally, I had the programmer, I just gave him all the ways in which the different types do things. And people that had 6 or 9 could get 25 or more. And then it just doesn't serve a purpose. So I go, no, just give them 1. And so then it was programmed that people just got the first notice. And then it went over people's heads. I go, okay, so what do people pay attention to? And it's no more than 7. But in your case, you got 2. But you did get an important paragraph that is telling you that you need to understand why. So that means you had a lot more patterns. Now, let me just see the top one, the top section. Let me see what you chose when. Okay, so you have the 2 4 cards, and then you had 2 7 cards, and then a 2 card and a 3 card. So yeah, that's where, so you really, in your case, what's interesting and different from the other 2 is you have 4 heart type cards and no gut cards.
mhm.
So being grounded is harder for you. Now scroll where I force you to choose a gut card in the Enneagram spread. And let's see. Whoop, don't go too far. Don't go too far. Back. Let me see all 6 at once. Yeah. Remember, the first column are your first choice cards, and the second column are your second choice cards. So you got the 2 4 cards, the 2 7 cards again. But when you did choose a gut, you chose 8. Now, this goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that 8 is not passive in any way. It should have shown up in your first group. But instead, you chose more heart type cards, which reinforces that you're a heart type. But sometimes people can just be a heartful person. But to not have any gut type in the top, and then to have your gut type being 8 is incongruent. Let's see your sentences, what you chose. Okay, so you chose 4, which makes sense, then 7, then 8, and then your idealized image and core fear, you chose 4 and 7 and 8. So why didn't you choose any 8 cards above? Why do you think?
Well, I was just in such a hurry. I mean, I was like, I think I should probably take it again. I mean, because I was just too excited. I think the 7 side got the best of me.
Well, you know, it's fascinating. And so let me know if you
It's-
take it again, because usually it's 9. It's like the 4 and 7 with 9. But then what that creates is someone absolutely in search of interesting, fascinating things, but there's a receptivity. People think you're receptive, but you at times could feel trapped by people. So even though you identify with self-pres, introversion overall, but 7's not so introverted. But you can be introverted.
Mhm.
But yeah, and then I would have guessed the self-pres sexual, so that makes sense. And what about in the points? Can you scroll to the points? When, Yeah.
Oh, here.
And it's a nice 6-point variable. That's what I call the stair step, meaning you're strongly your first type, then your second type is 6 points different, and then your third is 6 points different. So that means that they just flow into each other, and it would really depend on the situation as to when you caught yourself to understand it. But yeah, I mean, you could be the introverted self-pres 478. Let me know. But if you decide
Yeah.
479, I'd be fascinated to know.
Will there be more free interviews or something in the future?
Yeah, I do things all the time. The next one I'm doing is there's so much confusion about tritype and trifix, and people don't realize what came from when and how. And so I'm just answering any questions people have pertaining to tritype and trifix. So even a question about your tritype is meaningful. And I think I'm doing that in a month.
Yeah.
I think, let me see, I don't remember.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah,
And
March 8th. Oh, and then
okay.
the tritype relationship free thing on the 15th. So I'm doing 2 next month.
I'll try to
you'll
take
have
it
a month-
again.
Yeah, you'll have a month to think about it and see. And think
Mhm.
about what you would have said as a child for your adjectives. Now, they may mean the same thing, but just think about it.
Yeah. I was thinking that maybe the special notice is really good, that might be 7 with the 6 ring or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm very curious about it. But without doing the in-depth inquiry, which I can't do, nor would you want to, in this scenario, we can't fool the superego well enough. And I don't see your micro expressions to help me help you.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, but feel free to ask questions at the other events. Absolutely.
Will it also work to send you an email or something?
If it's something that I would answer universally, sure. But it could become a blog. It just won't have your name on it.
Yeah, it's okay.
I keep everything confidential. Don't worry.
Thank you.
All right. Well, take good care of yourself.
You too.
All righty. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. I hope to see you next time. And we'll go from there. All right. Okay. Good
Thank
night.
you. Thank you, everyone who shared. Bye.
Bye.